Okay, I hope people can see the screen. Can somebody verify that they can see the screen?
Yeah, I can see the screen.
Okay. Shall we get started, or we're gonna wait for? I guess it's 10:04, so we could go on, right? All right. So thanks. So thanks everyone. So I'm Post K, and I'm here with Rich from Black Diamond Software, and yeah, I guess so. You wanna take the first slide, or
So first of all, yeah, I can take it. Yeah. So first of all, welcome everyone. We're very glad that you could meet with us this morning. About a month ago, some 25 of us were very fortunate to attend a Jenkins Scalability Summit that was hosted by CloudBees and my company, Black Diamond Software. Had a number of really interesting and excellent presentations, followed by some very interactive and in-depth discussion on scaling Jenkins to meet the needs of enterprise-class installations. We had some great feedback on that meeting, and one of the common themes was that folks want to do that again, which we're very happy about. Just by way of introduction, my name is Rich Duncan. I'm the CTO of Black Diamond Software. We are a company that helps enterprises be successful with their ALM endeavors, from helping with process issues and helping teams be more agile, to DevOps requirements, release, deploy, and all the tooling necessary to be successful in that realm. Which of course brings us to our probably our closest partnership, which is with the CloudBees folks. You obviously know them as the folks that are specializing in making Jenkins better. They're also the #1 Java platform for services. They offer some very excellent courses in Jenkins training, by way of Jenkins training, and also CloudBees offers the Jenkins Enterprise product, which is a combination of some professional services and the enterprise plugins, which we find mission critical for our enterprise clients. Today's meeting will be the first half hour. Kasuke will be presenting the findings from the summit, and that'll be followed by ample time for anyone to answer questions. And of course, we'll do our best to answer them for you. And you can use the Q&A window in the WebEx session to accomplish that. So without further ado, the author of Jenkins and today's presenter, Kasuke.
Okay, thank you. So the way summit came into being is that we just had the Jenkins user conference in Palo Alto last month, and then in reviewing the submissions, the talk submissions that you see, we noticed that there are lots of great talk submissions from people using Jenkins at a pretty large scale. And in JUC, we wanted to have a diversity of talks. We realized that many people there aren't as serious users as they are. So we didn't want to entirely around the scalability. But I thought, I as a developer of the project, I really wanted to get into these detailed the issues, detailed talks with people who are running the largest installation around the world. And also, I thought these people would learn a lot from each other. They clearly share the same concerns and same pain points and so on. So, we thought, what if we put all these people together into one room and then let them talk to each other? And then, I could ask questions and I could hopefully try to identify the common themes between these people. And then that would guide the direction of the development in the future. And also, feedback that given to JUC earlier in the early years, that the people find these in-depth panel discussions interesting. Not just one person speaking, but the lively conversations between these users. Is my audio sketchy? All right, I'll wait for the more reports to chime in, but please don't hesitate to let me know. So that's how it came into being, and then so we aimed for the small interactive setup. We spent whole day, a day after day. The structure of the meeting was half of it we spent on the storytelling. So we asked for people to share their experiences around Scalability and Jenkins, and then the other part of the day is used this what's called an open space technology, where we basically ask attendees to write down what they wanted to talk about, and then we put them all together inside a number of post-it notes, and then we looked at them, compared them, and then came up with the topics that we want to talk about. We split in 2 tracks, and then had a pretty lively conversation about these things. So we in the end we took lots of notes from the session, and I edited them somewhat. So if you go to bit.ly/JSS13, you'll be able to see this edited note. And much of what I'm going to talk about is basically an excerpt from that. So what I wanted to achieve today is, of course, I wanted to share the kind of conversation that happened and my takeaway on what I thought is people correctly saying. And then I wanted to hear your thoughts and feedbacks on these things to see if they are, to see if you agree with them or to see if you don't. And in the hope that as we are using this information to guide our future development. Okay, so I want this to be as dive into as much as possible. So I'm looking forward to all the questions on these things. So the first story sharing that we've done is actually from me. I put my OSS Jenkins developer hat on, and I basically briefed the community about the kind of scalability improvements that we are doing in the core. So this key area where we worked on is this system resource consumption reduction. So we spent a lot of effort reducing the number of threads that Jenkins uses internally, ranging from the threads that we use to manage the SSH connections to these master to slave channel communications, even to the executors that we run. So previously, for example, if you're running 400 executors, runs 400 threads, and that alone could be occupied like 1 gigabyte of space. I'm sorry, this space for the stack. The stack space. But we've now reduced this substantially so that it's only allocated when it's actually used. So these things translate into a considerable saving. Okay, maybe I could see. Maybe the audio is having trouble. I could try to get the volume level back up. Is the audio being choppy, or is it just being like it sounds like I'm being far away from the mic, or
it's a bit choppy. Okay, it's a bit choppy. Okay. You're fading in and out at times.
All right, and I see the CPU usage very high. So let me quickly try to see if I diagnose this further. I know in the past the Windows update had occupied my CPU substantially. So sorry, I really apologize for the trouble. I spent a lot. We actually spent a lot of time yesterday and also today to verify that the setup is okay. I guess the Windows doesn't like me very much. So just give me a second while I disable my Windows update, and then hopefully that will restore the CPU. Once again, I apologize for the trouble. Okay. Hopefully it'll come down. Is it getting any better?
Probably talk a little bit more.
All right. So let me. Okay. Yeah. So let's keep going and then see. Let's see if you. Please let me know if the program continues. Okay.
It does sound a bit better now.
Okay, that's great. So another area of resource consumption improvement in the memory reduction. So as you might already know, we've implemented the lazy loading of the view records. We've also implemented the database plugin, which allows some of the plugins to store their vast amount of data into the database as opposed to the file system. So those are some of the things we've done in the core. And then I also did another story sharing, this time by putting my CloudBees hat on. As you may know, we have a number of supported products on top and then inside Jenkins. So, based on these experiences, we're building we are working on various efforts. One of them is called Jenkins Operations Center by CloudBees. And then if you look at my JUC slides, we refer to these things as multi-master or the meta Jenkins, but they're really the same thing. We've been renaming it a couple of times. So this is actually a server that controls other Jenkins masters. It's actually implemented on top of Jenkins. So it by itself kind of looks like Jenkins. But this is where we took the communication channel between Jenkins master and slave, and then basically apply that between the operations center and masters. So this allows us, this remote code execution scheme allows us to control Jenkins masters and then do things like allowing them to share slaves, the enforce a single sign-on across a large number of masters inside single organizations, force these common company local update center to install custom plugins, and things like that. And then we think we can, while this is still a very young product, we think we can take it to do lots more interesting things like moving jobs around between masters, or even using some sort of sharding so that the UI would look and feel like it's single Jenkins instance, but internally the jobs are owned by various different masters cooperating to each other, and then thereby sort of getting a little bit closer to the high available cluster setup. So we briefed the team of the summit about that, and then it was received pretty well. And another effort that we are working on is an entirely new job type. You may know that in Jenkins we have 3-star jobs and multi-configuration jobs and so on. But we are contemplating on adding an entirely new workflow job type. This was inspired by the current plugins such as Buildflow and Jenkow plugins. These turned out to be very popular and interesting in the community. So there's the widely perceived needs for doing better choreography between jobs, or the pipeline that allows you to put different jobs together to sort of provide a higher level concept. So a part of the reason we wanted to do this as an entirely new job type is so that it can execute asynchronously. So the current project model has the assumption that a single executor thread is going to carry it out from the beginning to the end inside, and in a single thread. So that creates a number of pains, such as the Jenkins cannot go down while that's running, and as we'll see later, other people have reported that is indeed one of the pains that they are seeing. So what we wanted to switch to is the asynchronous execution, where each small step is taken at a time, and then in between these steps, the state of the workflow gets checkpointed and persisted, and then so that the Jenkins or the master or the slave could go down and come back in between without affecting the state of the system. And then also we wanted to provide a DSL, a Groovy DSL, and basically a textual format for writing these workflows. And also because the Buildflow taught us that this is actually very popular. But we also wanted to do it in such a way that the actual syntax, the fact that it is a DSL, is decoupled from the underlying execution model, in the hope that in the future, if there's significant interest, we could provide visual editing of the workflow, which is what Jenkow plugin provides. And so the trick is to run the DSL, even though it's written as a procedural programming style. So we wanted to execute them asynchronously by using a technique known as the continuation passing style. And then so we also take this opportunity to sort of unify some of the confusing the concepts inside Jenkins, such as the distinction between build variables, the properties, and the environment variables, so that we have a simplified execution model for these things. So, so that was my part, and then the another story that came after that was from the Robert Sandell. He is maintaining a pretty large cluster in Sony mobile across the world, and his JUC slides actually cover what he does in great detail. It's highly inspirational for anyone who's managing large Jenkins installations. And then he basically told us what he wants to see. Christmas is his laundry list of wish list things that he'd love to see. So the first thing that came there is actually the master-to-master communication. So if you have two Jenkins masters, I suppose it's a very common requirement that you want to, you want to have one job triggered when a job in another Jenkins master is done. You might want to move jobs between them, or even move slaves between them. I suppose this happens when you're trying to split one large Jenkins instance into two, or maybe you're trying to shift the available capacity from one master to another temporarily, that sort of things. And then to facilitate that kind of slave transfer, you wanted the slaves to be treated more like first-class citizens internally, where the like jobs, where each job gets its own directory, and then the configuration file on its own. So then, this treatment would allow a simple program like rsync to allow him to copy bulk large number of slaves from one place to another, and so on. The another thing that was very interesting for me was that he spent a lot of effort into analyzing the metrics that's obtained from monitoring queues, the Jenkins queues. So he wanted to see the difference, for example, between the builds waiting in the queue because it's lacking the available executors versus the builds waiting in the queue just because the previous one is still running. Right? The former indicates the lack of resources, the latter is the normal situation. So he felt that the unfiltered access to the raw data that the Jenkins actually tracks them in a form that is persisted so that he could analyze them across a large time span would be useful. And as you see that in later stories from other people, this seems to be a common theme that we see from many people. And then he also talks about what we call the detached forking. This is an idea that we'll go into the detail later, but it's basically about the ability to monitor the ability to let process forked off and then on its own, so that Jenkins slave could come down and then go down and come back up without affecting this running process. So people running long-running stuff would highly benefit from that. And then another story sharing was from people in Yahoo. So this team, there was a couple of people from the team that internally provides Jenkins as a service. Inside, I believe, the advertisement, and I forgot the data mining of the side of the Yahoo. So they said that they have a few Jenkins master with 96 gigabytes of disk space, the 13,000 jobs configured on top of it. So it's a pretty massive setup by any metrics you can measure at. And the thing that really impressed people in the summit was the degree of the sophisticated, the high availability setup and in the HA. So they have the 2-node active standby setup. So as you may know, the Jenkins by itself is not amenable to the clustering. So they have the standby node that's ready to take over if the active node goes down. And then in addition to that, they have the across the data center failover prepared. So they use the NetApp to synchronize, to replicate Jenkins home from one data center to another at every 10 minutes, they said. And then they have another active standby set up on another data center, and then they could flip a switch and then put the failover in action within like a few minutes, and then the Jenkins would be back up and running in 10 minutes or so. So that way they reduce the risk of the system going down, as Jenkins is really critical for their use. Yeah, I guess so. This is the I took this from their slide. So you can see this like the active standby setup here that's currently being used. This is the secondary setup that's on another data center that's not currently being used, and then there's a replication going on from one node to another. And then the slave pools are shared, and so they, if the secondary nodes take over, or any of the backup node they take over, they disconnect the slave back, and it happens all pretty quickly. So that was pretty sophisticated work they've done. And then also they built a separate dashboard. So actually 2 of them. The one dashboard application was built to feed the product teams about the degree of continuous delivery practice deployment. So this dashboard provides more manager-oriented views, like how many deals are going on per day, which shows the degree of activity, amount of broken deals, the ratio of the code coverage going up and down, the test pass and test failures, and then also the time it took to repair any regressions. So their management and the product team can use this information to guide their own how far along they are in doing the continuous delivery, practicing continuous delivery. And then the second application they built is around the dashboard for themselves to monitor the health of the entire Jenkins installation. So here they measure the same kind of statistics, the amount of stuff in the queue, and so on, but also the things like the page hits, and in general sort of measure of the activities, the kind of things they measure for the website, I guess. And as you'd imagine, they have a lot of expertise in doing that sort of stuff. And they said to monitor the health of the slaves, they rely on the statistical approach. They simply look at the ratio of the failures that's happening, the build failures that's happening inside a single node. And then if that seems to be statistically higher than the other slaves, that's a good sign that there's something wrong with that node. So that's the kind of things. And they said they are working on open sourcing these plugins, and I assume it's somewhere between the lengthy legal process that these large companies would have to go through. And then the final story came from the people of Netflix. Again, they have pretty large deployment out there. The interesting thing about the Netflix is that they use their cluster entirely runs on EC2 as a pool of slaves. But at the same time, they're not using EC2 plugin, which allows Jenkins itself to scale up and down the cluster. They have another software to do that. And so from the Jenkins point of view, the pool of slaves are valid. But they actually, because of this nature, they said they do not spend too much time trying to maintain healthy clusters. As soon as they see that the slaves starting to develop trouble, they simply destroy that instance and provision a new one, and then go on their merry way. So it does make, this is an example of things like that making it easier to manage the system. But their feedback was mainly around the fact that the upgrading to a newer version of the core is more tedious than they'd like it to be. So currently, they do that by creating a secondary test instance that where they have the mock load and then run these things, their satisfactions, and then so they wanted to actually move that effort upstream by participating into the LTS testing effort, that they can run these validations while we are still testing LTS, so that any problems that they discover, we should be able to fix it before we declare the LTS a success. So that's the main thing. And then they also had interesting feedback about the scheduler-related improvements that people started using Jenkins, not just for the building, but also for monitoring. And then in terms of the upkeeping of the whole system, they came up with a number of Ruby scripts like deadlock detection, And then also these Ruby script that scans for the slave connection logs to discover any problems. But like I said, eventually they just throw away and they create a new instance. So they do not try to correct the situation, they just try to detect them. So one of my hopes is to actually collect all these interesting scripts that people have developed and ideally package that as a Jenkins plugin so that everyone gets to use the same degree of sophisticated cluster management scheme that these Sony or the Netflix or the Yahoo people are using. I think that would be a tremendous boon to the project. So that was in the morning time, and then we had a lunch, and we split into the afternoon sessions. The first session was actually one of the first concurrent sessions was on the Windows CloudBees. Unfortunately, I wasn't in this track; I was on the other track. And the notes from this session was quite sketchy, so I couldn't really figure out what was being discussed. But I just find it interesting that the Windows was listed specifically. It seems to indicate that there's some sort of problems going on with the bouncing Windows space, perhaps. And if so, we'd love to know. So I wanted to just put it out there for you to chime in. And in the meantime, the track I was in was talking about the testing LTS releases. So if you recall, I just mentioned that the Netflix was mentioning it. But it turns out that lots of these people in the room, they have they have developed their own acceptance tests effectively, developed internally to aid their upgrade process. So it was, in that sense, it was a little bit unfortunate in that everyone was sort of effectively duplicating these efforts and not sharing them. And certainly, as a developer of the project, you're not running those things at the point of LTS development. So we wanted to, there seems like a great opportunity to sort of join hands here so that perhaps we wanted to create some sort of mechanism or framework or test furnace to run the integration tests. So this would have to have things like there's some scalability in how we provision master and slave for the test setup. We need some proof for allowing people to install the arbitrary combination of the plugins. The test case needs to be decoupled from these details. We need some sort of mechanism to simulate the mock flows. So these are like real black box integration level testing. But it'd be great to, we already have something like this written in Ruby and then used in small scale. But I'm wondering maybe it's time to write that in Java because predominantly I think the people in the Jenkins project do Windows. So so this is one of the things I'm really looking forward to working on. And then from these people at the room, there was a lot of interest in actually pitching in helping actually running these large scale tests. So if you just do a back of the envelope calculation, creating a 50 slave cluster on today's IEC2 it only costs about $5 per hour. So it's not prohibitively expensive, even though the open source project as Jenkins doesn't really have that much money. So there might be some way for other people to help. Another avenue is that lots of these companies already have internal cluster, and they could actually allocate really sizable system for a short amount of time to run the test. It's just that we as the Jenkins project will not have access to these systems because they are company internal. So if we can come up with an easy to run test runs and allow these people to run them for us, that might be a great way to get this going. And then also to actually facilitate that, perhaps it'd be useful to have the test results, the mechanism to publish test results. Often these non-functional tests aren't about producing the success failure Boolean information, right? The results are a lot more nuanced than just black and white. So we need to be able to, we thought it'd be good to compare reports of the same test runs from different boards, compare reports, people running similar tests on different sets of plugins, and then identify failure patterns. So that's the there's lots of interest in this area, including lots of willingness to help. So, but at the same time, in my mind, it was clear that we need someone to see the effort to get the ball rolling, and so that other people could chime in. So again, that's one area of the work that I'm really looking forward to see. And then at the second session, actually the third session was around the workflow and pipeline. So I mentioned what I contributed to this topic in the past. But you know, I think the people in the room had a shared sense that the Buildflow and Jenkow plugin is sort of like, you know, the starting to be running in the interesting direction that we wanted to push this further. And then so there's a clear consensus that we want to support some long-run flow that tolerates the Jenkins shutdown. And then there's also a Cisco person was really, you know, keen on incorporating human interactions into this. So, you know, you think of it as approvals and some sort of checks and balances. And I personally agree with that, because any non-trivial process do involve human checks. Even, you know, in the past JUC talks, we heard from people who automated a substantial portion of it. But even these people, for example, still have to have manual check and balance for any time the schema changes in the database and so on. So being able to accommodate these things would be useful. And then there's another school of thought that perhaps, you know, instead of trying to boil the ocean, maybe, you know, we should look at some like a relatively simple things, like perhaps looking at some of the competitors. So that was also interesting. And then James from Cisco brought up another interesting point about what I call the batching up effect. You know, if you think about the pipeline where the changes are constantly coming in from one end and going out into another, you know, there's always to keep up with the load, to keep up the changes that's coming in. There's always constant batching up multiple commits into one unit and then running the other running tests. So these things aren't very adequately taken care of in the current workload scheme or the current plugins. So, you know, that is one of his points in JUC talk. So there are all these interesting points raised. And yes, people agree that the visualization was important. Yahoo guys have actually presented the interesting visualization that they've done, combined with the plugin that they wrote to get the characteristical information out of the build. And then people felt that the visualization is important for targeting managers. If you wanted to understand the bigger picture without necessarily understanding the gory detail. And also the visualization, the decision nodes. In other words, visualizing why a workflow did this as opposed to that. Not only just explaining what's done is critically important. So these are all interesting feedback. And then another session was around the detached forking. So I mentioned that this is an idea of running a process in such a fashion that tolerates the loss of master or the slave, so long as it comes back later on. So this by itself is actually not that hard. You know, the basic idea is kind of like running process with no hack. Right? So it's basically you keep on running even if the controlling terminal or the controlling process disappears. And we just, you know, just redirect that to somewhere else, record the exit code, but later when we check back in, it would be able to, Jenkins would be able to recover all the outputs of how it went. So this is easy. What's really hard is that currently the freestyle project and all the other projects essentially in Jenkins assumes a single-threaded synchronous execution model. So in my mind, to do this, we really need a proper asynchronous job type like workflow. That's my current thinking of how we do it. But it was good validation that this is actually a feature that in many people's mind is high priority. Okay, so another session that we have a very lively conversation on was the area of the high availability. So we kind of knew that this is high on people's agenda, but so to be able to discuss the actual, you know, the multiple ways forward and then the sort of ins and outs and pros and cons of these things are really tremendously useful. So I think that it's fair to characterize that there was a lot of interest in providing horizontal scaling. As you can see in the case of Yahoo, and then also we provide this in our CloudBees, Jenkins Enterprise by CloudBees. But setting up the active standby clustering is sort of today's state of art. So that as the usage of Jenkins expands, they're really interested in allowing multiple the Jenkins masters so that they could share the workload. And then trick is to do this in a way that manages the backward compatibility so as not to break all these 800 or so plugins. First, we talk a little bit about the subset of programs that would make it easier to solve this problem. So, for example, a lot of people felt that the reason they needed to restart Jenkins is to upgrade or install new plugins. So, that would really make it easier. In solving this is easier if you forget for a moment about the unplanned sudden outages, and also perhaps an effort to be spent on reducing the active standby failover time, and that would be also substantially simplifying the program. So then we talked about actually more about the true horizontal clustering and how to go about doing this without breaking everything. So I think the key idea that seems to have resonated in a lot of people's mind is this idea of the phantom jobs. So this is the idea where the multiple masters have a same set of jobs, but one of them are designated as a real owner of that job, and so that guy performs the build and act as the authoritative source, but the other participating master owns the phantom jobs just enough to be able to render and interact with other jobs. And then in this manner, hopefully we'll be able to move the ownership of a job from one master to another, and then thereby yeah.
The audio is still flailing. It seems like it's gotten worse.
All right.
I don't know if your computer got busy doing something.
Okay, I apologize for the problem. This time it does. CPU looks good. Let me try adjusting. Is that being choppy, or is it the volume being low? I don't really see any strange activity in the system.
It's more choppy, I think.
Okay.
It comes and it goes.
Okay. Let's see here. The only thing I can think of is holding on to this, the volume level so that it couldn't auto-adjust. It looks like I don't have any option but to just keep on going. So I apologize for the trouble. I apologize for the people who are having trouble. Hopefully you can learn that from the notes. All right. So and then it was worth pointing out that the Red Hat solved a similar problem with the read-only replica. Their motivation was actually entirely different, but they came up with a set of plugins that allowed one Jenkins master to replicate the data from another Jenkins. So that would be usable if you're trying to reduce the workload from your primary Jenkins instance. And then finally, in the last session, we talked about the master-to-master communication in general. The HA, the number of actual details in the HA already touched on this point, but the master-to-master communication in some looser form, like if you have multiple masters owned by different teams, being able to have them talk to each other would be tremendously useful. And then so we talked about some of the use cases to identify the degree of integration that they have to have. And then many of them are simple, like being able to trigger jobs, just being able to see one job on one master on another, and then perhaps doing some centralized management, like post installations, upgrade of certain plugins. So that's that. So the technical means to achieve this, I think the consensus was that the simple point-to-point communication of the channel, a mechanism that we already use between master and slaves, many plugin developers have become familiar with, would be probably quite sufficient. Even the biggest of these people are talking about like 6 or 7 masters, and not like 600 masters. And then another interesting point raised that perhaps it'd be interesting to embed existing coordination mechanisms like Zookeeper as a sort of like a building block for people to build interesting clustering application on top of these Jenkins masters. So that's, I think this is actually one of the things that we are thinking about open sourcing from Jenkins Operation Center like CloudBees. We are evaluating which would fit in the open source. Hopefully we'll make some progress in there. Okay, so that takes me to the last slide. The one from the last. So as I said, the notes are available on the /JSS 13. So Jenkins Scalability 13. So feel free to put your comments there, or the agree or disagree with the comments that's posted there. That'd be greatly appreciated. And then so my key takeaway from this meeting was that I think there's clearly a common theme across many large Jenkins users that needs being tackled. So the one I think was the better monitoring of the queues and the cluster for the administrators. And then we clearly need a way for people to collaborate on testing on the LTS and other non-functional tests. There's also a lot of interest among the HA and master-to-master communication in general. It seems like a logical next step. And the workflow feature, I felt like it was validated. So I'm very much interested in making actually the prototyping this effort and see what happens. And I think among the people who are there, the summit was overall very positive. And this year we had to turn down a lot of people's requests to attend because we wanted to keep the conversation sort of lively and interactive, which in my mind demanded that the meeting be small. But then next year, I think we'll definitely try something like this again, and perhaps opening up the sort of the area bigger than just the scalability, and hopefully in bigger venue to accommodate more people. So that was that. And so with that, I wanted to, now I think it's my time to go look back to Q&A. Looks like there's quite a few here while I was busy talking, although so many of them are audio related. Sorry.
Kosuke, one of the questions was the new workflow that you discussed. Will that be available in open source Jenkins or only as part of the CloudBees offering?
So we haven't. So I think. Well, yeah. So we haven't decided. So I think. So I think I think it's easy to imagine that some portion will definitely make sense in OSF. So for example, I think one of our experiences from the folder plugin is something like this needs to have a wide adoption in plugins, right? So and then that means the basic portion needs to be in the open source. And then so exactly which lands where, which lands proprietary. We just haven't gotten to that point yet. I mean, the whole thing is still just an idea, a bunch of the sort of design documents. So there's nothing, no code written on it, so it's too early to talk about that. But that's where I think we are. So I think it makes sense to have something open source. Just not sure where. All right, so should we then go through where should we start? I'm sorry that so many people have audio too. And then we're going down here. Yeah, okay.
One of the things that Gareth Bowles pointed out was that we actually were at the Windows discussion about slaves. You can see his comments there.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So actually, yeah. So it looks like right. I think our support people also told me that the Jenkins installation of the Windows is kind of painful, and it is true. And I clearly blame Microsoft for coming up with the exotic security model, and then also coming up with a very poor error reporting. In case of error, we only get 32-bit error code, and then that's it. So there's no help as to there's no help as to where to look. So there's I think. I saw that there's the new protocol that allows remote process sampling, known as the WinRM. So my hope is to actually implement a new launcher based on WinRM, and that might help with the situation. So maybe that's the kind of thing they discussed in the Windows thing. Yes, and then and then JNLT is more reliable, but hard to automate. Yes, that's right. So another thing that we could try perhaps is to package the JNLT slave as a MSI installer, and then people can deploy that en masse through the Active Directory or the installation scheme or something like that. So I think there's an opportunity to do that. So it's yeah, that's interesting feedback. And then on the folder plugins, okay, so another question, the folder plugins, the core functionality needs to be open source. And then I'm actually happy to report that as I mentioned in the Jenkins user conference, the entire folder plugin is now open source. So you could see in the Jenkins the GitHub repository, and then you could use it, and then you could extend it. So yes, we solved that problem, and then I'd like to think that that taught us something and going forward there. And then am I interested in building a workflow with type up on the Jenkow plugin? I really need to spend some time looking at the execution model inside the activity to see if we can retrofit that. I think the challenge that I see is we are not necessarily interested in translating the workflow into DPMN for executions. So we wanted to own that sort of, because it's CTS, we can actually map that to DPMN very easily. So we just somehow we need to use it to perhaps manage state and also to incorporate whatever people are writing in DPMN. But the whole thing needs to kind of expand more than the DPMN. So that's the thing I need to research. So that's where I am. Okay, so I think I went through the round of questions. Any other? There's a more in the chat window too.
Kosuke, there's a question about multi-master solution. When is that going to be available?
So we are going to ship the first version in this November. Actually, we've been busy testing it right now. It's looking good, so we are quite excited. Yes, there's also in the chat window the Mujib that I mentioned. From the storytelling is actually in this show, and then he said that Yahoo would be happy to host the next meetup, so that's great. So there's a number of offers from these people in the room who have better venue than we are to host the next month. So I think it'd be quite interesting. So right, okay, so smart master solution will be available soon, and then we want to, I think similarly we want to open source the portion of it. Again, the idea was to build, I think the lots of strengths from Jenkins, a great strengths of Jenkins that comes from the fact that it's an ecosystem of people writing stuff on the same platform that allows other people to leverage. So in my mind, the only way to keep that going is to do the same with the multi-master, the operation center. So we provide, I think, what I think would make sense. We haven't decided on anything yet, but what I think would make sense is to come up with the open source abstraction for enumerating the communication channels between masters, and then open that up to the plugins, and then we probably we can productize the more complex approval workflow involved in sort of connecting different masters, because it involves some trust relationship between them, and then build some interesting feature on top of it. But otherwise, we should let people they build something similar on top of the open source foundation. So it is right. There's a comment related to master communication. Yes, it's very interesting to allow the access to other masters object model. And so that's exactly the kind of thing I love people to do. And the good thing about using the Sandell mechanism between the master to master is that all these problems are already effectively solved. So you can allow you to send the code to be executed on the node and stuff like that. So yeah, we should be able to do that. And then all the portion to cover the next question afterwards on mode. The things, for example, the things that allow people to run Groovy scripts across all the participating masters, in my mind, that kind of thing really needs to be in open source, because we hope that the people will be writing all the scripts. But so that's my hope. The decision like that involves a lot more than just myself, so I can't really speak definitively as CloudBees, but that's what I personally think. And then moving on to the question from Harish, can it support active standby? Yeah, so the active standby HA is actually already very well supported. So as you can see, the Yahoo guys, you can actually deploy something like that on your own if you have prior experience in these things. And also, if you don't mind my shameless plug, in Jenkins Enterprise like CloudBees, we added some stuff inside the Jenkins itself to make it very easy for you to deploy that kind of configuration. So that's, in my mind, active standby HA is almost a solved problem. There are some improvements to do performance-wise and so on, but I think the real challenge the kick that I got out of this summit was that the next step from here is more to like something like phantom jobs that allows masters to blend in to each other in a more seamless fashion. And then, so another question from Mo that says, do I recommend states using their own workspace or sharing the same? Okay, so it actually depends on what you're using. In most people's deployment, I think it does not make sense for workspace to be over NFS. Instead, I think every slave should use their local disks as a workspace for their independence and for maximum performance. On the other hand, I have seen some people who use workspace over NFS. Like these people are saying that their workspace is huge, like multiple gigabytes, and then checking out that on every slave is just prohibitively expensive. So I could see that in those extreme circumstances, it could make sense to have workspace mounted over NFS. And then Nicole asks, are there any thoughts about making it easier for the build steps to communicate with each other? I don't recall any conversations like that in the summit. So we already do provide I think we provide plenty of ways for them to communicate with each other. So, for example, every build step could publish the arbitrary object into the build, the ongoing build, and both in the persisted form and also in the transient form that only going to stay while the build is in progress. And then they could let the other build look at those. So, yeah, so in my mind, that's not a problem, but yeah, so including, you can do things including injecting environment variables for the later process. Perhaps there's a room for improvement in this area. But in any case, it sounds like pretty simple tactical improvements that we should be able to do in like a few commits. So if that's an issue, if this kind of thing is an issue, I'd love to see some tickets filed, and it sounds like you've already tried to develop plugin that. So if you can point some concretely as to what you tried and why, what you wanted to see, I'm sure we can probably take this very easily. Okay. So yes, I think that's all right. Okay, so next, are there any timeline for the Detached Forking? Oh boy, I wish we might. No, I don't think. No, we don't have any timeline for this. Like I said, this whole workflow effort is still just on the paper, and no code has been written. We've been more focused on actually at the CloudBees, we've been more focused on getting the Jenkins operations center by CloudBees out of the door. So, but after that, then my main work is supposed to be the workflow. So that's hopefully where I hope to deliver this feature. Yeah, so that's the timeline for the lack thereof. Okay, so that brings us about an hour. Are there? Yes. So I guess just to wrap up, yeah. So the notes are publicly available and then are publicly commentable. So we if you have other people in your company, if you want to pass around, please do so and let us know if you are working on the right thing or not. We are looking forward to keep hearing from you. And hopefully we'll do this next year, and then we hope to see many more of you in there. So I think that's it for that day. Rich, do you want to add some last words before?
Just first of all, Kosuke, thanks so much for presenting, and thank you everybody on the line for bearing with some of the intermittent audio problems. We really appreciate your input, and we look forward to being a part of this next year.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.